I think that there's a huge opportunity for management companies to stop using these templated websites and actually get a lot more data and intel into how people are using their site and to improve your conversion ratio. And then in even just whether it's retargeting. I mean, you have an ad, you drive someone to your website, you capture that lead, and then you can nurture it with email or something like that. I mean, think of just so much of our marketing is so transactional. You're looking for an apartment, we have it. Do you want to buy it or you want to rent it? And I think that there's so much that could be done in terms of, and especially now with AI and creating content.
All right. Welcome to the Digital Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Yeah, I'm going to hit it anyways. Reed and I were just recording some ahead of time, and he was correcting me because I was mispronouncing Moshe's
name. Which, yeah, I was just saying, I'm sure it wasn't the first time for him, but you did ask up front, as you usually do. And he said it's Moshe, and then you, at some point, it may have been just 25% in, but you went to Moshe.
Yeah.
And great guy. He rolled with it. He's okay with it.
Moshe is...
Maybe I should have stepped in.
I do like... Yeah, maybe.
It's kind of like having, something hanging from your nose or, it's like a true friend would step in. I don't know if that's one of those. You know what?
If you're listening to this, Moshe, which I'm sure you will, think of it. Dale Carnegie says knowing someone's name is the highest form of respect. If I switched it 25% in, I'll let you make your own conclusion. No, I like Moshe quite a bit. I feel bad that I started messing it up, but yeah, he had some of the deeper questions we've had of anybody, and it really excited me. In fact, you and I were talking after we let him go, how like there's so much breadth with him that I wanted to cover, but then I wanted to see the landscape and then I wanted to dive in. So I never got to dive into any one area as much as I wanted to. But I was like, and then I went into a meeting with Courtney and Nicole, and I actually had to stop myself. I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm a little hyper right now because we just had a really good podcast interview. And Courtney just thought it was funny. She's like, "That's good energy. Love you bringing the energy." And I'm like, I feel like I'm like running over everybody because I was so hyped. So
totally. Yeah, I felt a little like the parent, like on a Sunday, like taking the kids to the candy store, like between the two of you. My energy wasn't there because I got up at 4:30 this morning, like as we were sending Sterling off on her Voyager venture with my mom for a 10-year-old birthday. So yeah, I wasn't quite as alert, but it was entertaining to see two of the most curious men, people in the industry. Because I don't know if you knew that, but that on his LinkedIn, and I don't know if that's in the description, but I distinctly remember seeing the most curious person in multifamily, and which he validated. I was like, so is that self-anointed? And I think for the most part, it's a great little branding ploy. But as I said, I feel like I got a pretty good horse sitting across from me, and so yeah, the two of you certainly can go wide or deep. And I think it's just, I love the way we kind of wrapped it up, but it's like he was great pinch hitter, and probably could be at any point for us if we get crossed up on some scheduling. And he was like, just call me your plan B.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it worked out to get him on. Also, I'm glad you called out that you didn't seem yourself because you did feel a little bit. It was almost like you had Moe's barbecue before we came in here, but
yeah, it felt like that, except like triple meat, all turkey, if like the tryptophan or whatever it's called.
I got to share one thing before we recap why you should finish listening to the episode. Do you remember the first time you did take your girls to a candy store?
No. I can tell you though, the first time I remember like a legit candy store, because you can just go down the candy aisle in King Supers and it will feel like you're in I mean, that's how much candy. It's kind of frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Small problem, in America, amount of sugar that's available, but I won't even go there, even though I kind of just did. But was downtown on 16th Mall. Are you familiar with? I don't remember the name of that store.
It's like Rocket or something.
So when they first were getting their blue ribbons, which means that they, were this kind of student of the week or the month or whatever, like if they got one of those, then I would take them downtown for dinner, and then we'd go to the candy store. And they, at that point, were probably 4 or 5, like when they first got those. Hysterical. I mean, they didn't even know what to do. Their eyes just were popping out of their head, and then they were, of course, like, how do I navigate this?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where the question was leading, but that's my first memory of really taking them to a genuine candy
Well,
store.
just because of how it can go exactly not how you envision. So, like, we were stranded at the airport with Griff because of, I don't know, some flight thing. And there was a candy store in the airport. And I was like, oh, this will be fun. I'll walk this toddler in here. And he did not care. No, kudos.
Oh, really?
Because we haven't really ever given him candy. So he doesn't, well, in fact,
He didn't know to get
I
excited.
can't remember that we've ever given him candy. And so he just didn't even understand. He's like, I just thought the colors and all that kind of stuff would be cool. He just did not give a rat's ass.
Wow.
And then
Definitely your son, I can tell.
Yeah, because I don't eat candy. Then I took him to a toy store there, and sort of same thing. He ended up liking a ball, just like a little ball that you bounce versus all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, I guess I like that he just wants the ball and doesn't want any candy or flashing toys. So this is cool. But it is one of those things where I was like, this will be amusing. But then this morning, I tried to give him. I had tried for like over a week, like for him to take vitamins. We tried to give him some vitamins and he really rejected that. He's just like, this is the worst. It was like we had slammed his hand in a door or something. And so I got him some gummy vitamins and he kept rejecting those. And then finally this morning he had his first one. And then the absolute worst you could imagine. He was just like, more. Like, and I was like,
I love the sign language.
Yeah, I know. And Nicole was like, this was what I was afraid of. I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? Because I've been trying to get him to eat this gummy vitamin. And now he just won't shut up about wanting more gummies. And she's like, so that's it. No more gummy vitamin for him. So I'm like, well, I guess we're back to no vitamins for the kid.
That's
anyways,
tough.
There you go.
Well, if he has a complex or issue with it, and I bump into him in his teenage years, I'll explain how it all went down.
Yeah. All right. Well, this episode with Moshe, right? All right, Moshe. This episode is really fun. Basically, we had someone that had to reschedule on us, and so last minute we were gonna have Moshe on at a different time, but he jumped in for us, as Reed said, and he just decided to sort of flip the tables and follow his own curiosity. So he had recently read. Well, he said he's kicked off his curiosity journey with reading John Doerr's. Which John Doerr book did he read? Something about.
Is that the market leadership or market leaders?
No. Whatever the measure what matters.
Measuring what matters.
Yeah. So then after John Doerr's book, he went down. He just started following that curiosity, and eventually he recently read Moneyball and started to think of like, what was Moneyball? Like, how could we take Moneyball to multifamily? Which I thought was awesome. And you wear your Moneyball T-shirt like every 3 weeks. I'm surprised that even though you've brought it up numerous times, that you and I hadn't ever said what would be our Moneyball number. So I did ask you a little bit on the episode, or we sort of got it at that.
We have though. I feel like we have because of that whole. And I said it, when we were talking to him just about the good to great and like what's our number. We haven't. I won't say we took the same approach or that exact approach necessarily of Moneyball that he's describing. But I mean, I really have wondered, and out loud to you for sure, and both sides, like what numbers really are most important for us. I don't know if that's necessarily the exact question though. Maybe that's why we framed it or saw it a little bit differently than what he's describing, because I feel like Moneyball is very applicable like across baseball now. Like it's not ubiquitous, but everybody now sees on base percentage as one of the most meaningful numbers in all of sport, or at least in baseball. And I don't know if that's really the spirit of the Jim Collins, where it's like he seems to advocate for something super individualized, whereas I didn't take Moneyball to be that. If you getting my kind of distinction here.
Yeah, I do. I don't know that would be either, because it's surprising. I mean, I'm sure every team in the MLB has talked about Moneyball since that.
Yeah.
But to your point, like, we didn't see everyone changing their. Well, I know a lot of strategy has changed, but not everyone has gone to like dollars per on base percentage, right? So like, would the Yankees have a different Moneyball number than? So it's kind of like what we get into the discussion with Moshe about is like, what it can't. It seems to me at first blush that maybe different organizations can have a different number that is their Moneyball number, versus like, this is ubiquitous, the most important number to be optimizing towards. So what do you think about that? Would you push back on that, and just generally speaking, like, should other agencies have the same number that we have?
I don't think so, and I think it does have a lot to do with the your personnel. So I'm going to go back to sports analogies, but one of the things that's changed a lot in the NBA, another sport here, is people playing small ball. So it's similar to Moneyball, but it used to be all about the post, the bigs, having a big center, dominant center, just think Shaquille O'Neal, and really pushing people around, playing low block game. And then in came and now wrapping up, funny enough, the dynasty, because Klay Thompson just got traded away from Golden State, but they really mastered small ball, which is still kind of sticking right now in the NBA. And it's like, this is all about 3-point shooting. How many of those can you really get up, and just run your client like until they can't, they can't keep up anymore.
And
And I'm
why do
just
they call it small?
small ball because you're not going to do that with Shaquille O'Neal's. So you're really putting more of a focus on guards that can do all three, or forwards get meaning pass, dribble, and shoot.
So
But
it's more about, like, generally speaking, a Shaquille O'Neal sized individual couldn't do all three of those skills.
definitely not.
Okay.
But wouldn't be able to keep up, like, probably from an endurance standpoint either.
Okay.
And so then taking that a step further, they were like, you really need long, kind of like 6'7", 6'6" is like the ideal. Maybe there's room for a few smaller, but so it evolved into still kind of, well, now I'm going to say mid-sized ball.
I was thinking long ball
Yeah,
now.
right. It didn't get to long, yeah, quite long ball, but I'm trying to, let me just say that wouldn't have worked, um, and still doesn't for certain teams. And so I don't think that if you're in the NBA right now, it's an automatic. It still has to do with how you've built your team and how you're approaching the game. And for us, the way we win may look a little different than other digital agencies. And so I don't think it makes sense to just assume there's a ubiquitous or metric that fits most companies. I think a lot of it has to do with personnel and then what's happening in the industry at that time. So I think timing has something to do with it as well.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit where I was
The
gonna
era
go.
of small ball, the era of like low post, the era of home runs, the era of
Yeah.
like on base percentage. And it's like, and somebody drives that, right? Comes in, it's almost like back to the innovators a little bit,
Yeah.
some disruptive, like, coach or, visionary comes in, and eventually 5 to 7 years later, they've changed the game, so to speak. And, but you need the right personnel in order to play that game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, they say in fighting that style makes fights, right? And I view it a little bit the same way here, where it's like, what is the game being played today, and how can you do it different? It's sort of the whole contrarian, a little bit Peter Thiel here, right? You have to be contrarian and right, in order to win big.
Mhm.
And same thing when, like, disrupting a market, you got to be contrarian to what the rest are doing. You got to be right about it working, and then if everyone sort of skates to that puck or whatever, right? Then someone else is going to come in and do it differently. And that's just how it all evolves. The interesting and unique and exciting thing about business is that it doesn't have to be a one, like winner takes all, like sports, right? Sports is winner take all. It's not, the infinite game of business is not that way. So in
If you're,
different
yeah,
ways, I could see, we were in the episode, we talk a little bit about Red Bull and versus, I'll say, Monster. And it's like they just do things differently, and that's okay. And they both are successful in their own way.
mhm.
So anyways, now that we've had whatever a couple hours since we recorded the episode, do you have a different number for agencies? Meaning, or at least our agency?
On what we should be focused on.
Yeah, what would be our Moneyball? And I would
Well,
say,
yeah,
I bet the A's could change their Moneyball number year to year, or every couple of years, right? A little bit of great game of business on that one, where it's like, for now, our Moneyball number is this, and then later it changes based on the environment.
it's hard to argue with the response time. It still seems like one of the best things for us to measure indicators of like the health of an account. Um, it's not. I'm just saying, if I picked one, it's like everything for us is built on that experience, the
Mm-hmm.
relationship that they have with that single point of contact. And the best way to define that is how quick are we to communicate?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wish I could get to the quality of the communication. It's similar to leads versus like quality leads. Yeah, that would be my 1B, but I just don't know how to effectively measure that.
Yeah, I love it though, because I was just interfacing with a contractor that we work with that is excellent. And I was like, I have 3 minutes before the next meeting, and I fire something off, and I see them typing immediately, and I was like, awesome! I love that they're responding already.
Hmm.
But then on the other hand, they didn't finish typing before I had to go to my next meeting. So now it's like this gapped thing of like, will I even get to it today? The
Hmm.
question I had.
Hmm.
But if it really felt like no friction, I'm allowed to just call them right now or whatever, that blow my experience away. It's like they're always waiting, white glove service kind of thing, right? And I could just relate that if I was one of our clients, I kind of want the same thing. So
Perfect
makes
example of
sense.
though what or how things can change, because right now that might be the number or metric I give you, but if the advent of chatbots, I'm gonna throw my account manager bot
Yeah.
instead of the AI leasing agent, but were to come to fruition and become table stakes or an expectation, then you no longer can or would, I would think, count on that number, right? Because everybody's getting immediate gratification instant responses. Then it shifts to the quality of the response, or so it
Oh,
would seem,
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it
versus
doesn't.
like everybody's going to hear back within 3 seconds now, because that's where technology has taken us. So that can't be the game or the metric that prioritize above all.
When I hit that chat GPT this morning for the we were in the meeting and we were having to write a job description, like seat job description. And at first I asked the question and it started going like, hey, a good, whatever job description looks like this. And I was like really pissed off at first because I'm like, "Ugh, didn't go deep. It's giving me surface level." And then it kept writing and I saw the response later and it then gave me exactly what I wanted. And then it went even further and gave me more than what I asked for. And I was like, meaning it gave me the, I think it's like the KPIs or whatever, the scorecard. And I was like blown away. So my first blush was like, immediately I was like, poo poo. I asked AI and it effed up again. But instead it was just letting me know it understood the question I asked and then said, here's the answer. And then here's one more. And I was like, son of a gun, you did it. You're pretty damn good at this.
Wow.
So I guess I'm going to use it again.
Yeah.
All right. Well, enjoy this wide-ranging, fun conversation with Moshe. Okay, we're here with Moshe. Moshe, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Moshe Crane, VP of Branding and Strategic Initiatives with Sage Ventures. We're based in Baltimore, although we don't have any properties in Baltimore. We're an owner-operator. Owner has his own money in all deals. We do have some outside investors, and we also have a development arm. On the management side, we're at 4,000 units now. And on our development arm, we're building single family, usually they're communities, townhomes, or condos, and those are for sale projects. And we have our first project where the two arms are coming together. We're doing a ground up lease up. So we bought a property, actually, we converted to self storage. We just finished phase one of 288 units where our construction team built it. And now our management team has taken over. We just passed 94% occupancy and phase two is underway. So I am having a blast, having fun, poking a lot of holes.
Okay. And I know you have a really fun idea for us to do sort of a live workshop. But before we get to that, why don't you give a little bit of background on yourself? Just give a little bit of your history in the industry, and then we can get to this workshop idea you have.
Not super complicated. I started in commercial real estate leasing, office and warehouse space. I then went to work for an operator for a little bit, wanted to get back on the owner side. I never thought I would be in multifamily. This company is local and was growing at the time. They were 1,800 units and they had this position of director of leasing and marketing. And they actually had somebody else that they hired, but that fell through. And they came back to me and said, "Hey, we're willing to take a chance on you." And I took it and ran, and I didn't stop running. And we grew. I had some hiccups when adjusting to the growth, but it's been a wild, fun ride since.
Yeah, well, growth always causes some sort of like hiccups along the way. So I think as long as you can expect that it won't damage you too much. Okay, so why don't you walk us through? Our schedules got a little last minute. We got you in here, and in the prep, I usually ask someone what a home run for them would be when they join us. And you had said, "Hey, the fact that this is impromptu is a home run." I was like, "Oh, interesting." Usually people are freaked out. And then you said that you wanted to do this like some sort of like a workshop style thing. So let's go there. I'll pass it over to you.
So I'm fascinated. So the best thing that happened to me when I got into this industry is a lot was not explained to me. So there was a lot of figuring out things on my own. And when I didn't get an answer that made sense or that I was satisfied with, I would dig deeper and try to understand things. That's, why we do certain things, terms that we use, what they actually mean, and a whole gamut of things. And at some point I got into audiobooks. And the first book that someone had recommended to me was It's about OKR, measure what matters, and it's about OKRs. And I can't tell you that I'm an OKR specialist by any stretch, but the concept, instead of having a goal, you have an objective, and then your key results is how to achieve that objective. So let's just give a quick example. Let's say somebody says they have a goal of to quit smoking. Well, what's the point of the goal? How are you going to get there? Rather, if you're using OKRs, the objective would be like, I want to improve my health by X%. And the key result would be, I quit smoking, I have a diet, and I have an exercise routine that I'm using. And so then you start following those things. And if you hit those key results, that should achieve your objective. And so that frame of mind really changed everything for me. Like, what is the actual objective with things that we do? And then, like, what are the steps to actually get there? And then along my journey of being curious and listening to audiobooks, I listened to the book Moneyball. So that's the baseball story of the A's and how they did not have a lot of money. And they came up with this whole new system of how they look at value and pricing. And in a nutshell, what they did is they viewed players valuable based on getting on base. So instead of typical baseball numbers of home runs, RBIs, batting average, they looked at, if the more you get on base, the higher likelihood you're going to score more runs. The more runs you score, excuse me, the more wins that you'll have. So they started valuing players based on how their on base percentage, and so they started to acquire sign players that other people overlooked. They were either older, but they were really good at getting on base, and they kind of revolutionized baseball. It's kind of fun, actually. I live in Baltimore. I grew up in Denver, so the Rockies stink, but the O's happen to be really good now.
Yes, they
And
do.
the Baltimore Orioles have taken that same model, and it's interesting. I haven't checked it this year, but the last year at least, they were like one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, and they won their division. And this year, they're again the top team in their division, and I don't think their payroll has gone up yet. They have this whole farm system, and they've built up talent. So it's really interesting. And I think if you look at, so I would like to do an exercise, because you asked me what we should do, is let's go through some ideas, and we're going to create some solution or product, or maybe we could just go through some that are existing. We don't have to call any names, and like assess it, like how valuable is this solution or the problem that's trying to be solved. So let me just give you an example that has nothing to do with prop tech. A lot of operators, when they buy a property, they do this value add. So they're going to renovate units to increase the value of each apartment, and that's how you grow rent. So everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people do the same thing. They're renovating the kitchen, appliances, countertops, backsplash, so forth, and they're pumping in $10,000 to $15,000, and then they're going to bump the rent, $100, $150. When you look at it in terms of value of something I think is very undervalued, I don't think a backsplash improves the quality of somebody's life. I believe lighting does. And I don't think a lot of people put in recessed lighting. So putting in recessed lighting is a lot cheaper than a backsplash. And I think your return on that would be actually higher than a backsplash. Or if you're going from black appliances to stainless steel, whatever that cost is and whatever your return is, recessed lighting, I think, is like Moneyball, like very undervalued in the sense that people don't do it. It does not cost a lot to put that in, but you could bump the rent $25 a month, and your return is going to be a lot better than some of these bigger, more standard items that people focus on.
Did you bring up recessed lighting to me at RetCon?
I might have.
Okay, because I remember when I hadn't yet, but we just bought a new home, and Nicole and I, and they have recessed lighting in the home. And I remember I could not remember who told me about it, but I was like, "Look at this, we got recessed lighting, much higher quality of life for me, thank you." But I think at the time you were telling me that like it's like $100 or something, right, to like put in like
Or
a.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and versus the backsplash or whatever. So I love the concept. It makes a ton of sense to me. Also, do you remember? I don't know if you were around then, but Reed, I think you'll remember when we were at MTech back in what was that, 2018?
Mm.
There was that other company that was presenting there too. That I think it was called like Envato or something along those. Have you heard of this company, Moshe?
Which company?
I think it's called Envato or was Envato or Envado.
No.
ENVA, either TO or DO. Anyways, they're not around anymore, but there was a fella then that was presenting and hit what he was effectively doing. Now this is I'm leaping to some assumptions because he would not disclose how he was doing this. But basically, what I believe was happening is I think they were scraping apartments.com, and then they were paying attention to what amenities different units had, and then they had built a model that allowed you to basically say, hey, if I upgrade to stainless steel appliances, how much can I how much can I raise rent? Or if I do this, how much can I charge for rent? So it was trying to do it at the amenity level for basically what you're talking about, where it's a for rebuilds, for example, so that you would know what to upgrade. That company, I just checked on it after, actually, funny enough, right after RecCon, because I saw him there, and he stopped that company and is doing something else now. But the concept makes a ton of sense to me because, I already feel like the pricing models are far behind, and so I don't know how people normally do renos and how they decide to change price. So, anyways, I love the concept. So, where should we go
So
from here? Do you want to throw some things out or what?
let's just talk about marketing in general, and if there's any specific things, and I'll start with a story. So I think it was the end of 2022, and at the time I was the director of leasing and marketing. We were talking about this project and initiative to really dive in and have a better understanding of what we were getting from our marketing. And so the first question was, what's the objective here, right? Are we trying to decrease our spend? Are we trying to just, and the answer was really like, we're spending a lot of money on marketing across our portfolio, and we would just want to have a better idea of what we're getting from that marketing. So I said, okay, that's interesting. Next week we have that. This was in a weekly meeting that we had. I came back the next meeting, and I took our whole portfolio, and I took the vacancy loss for the last 12 months for each property. I took the number of move outs, and I made a turn cost, which I think was kind of on the low side of $1,200 per move out. I took concessions for the last 12 months, and then our marketing spend. So across 10 properties, I think it was at the time, maybe it was 9 properties, we were spending about $500,000 in marketing. We had $3.4 million in vacancy loss, $1 million on concessions, and $1.6 million on turn costs. So I said, if we get better at reducing our vacancy loss, right? These are all big numbers, a lot higher than $500,000. And if I can reduce my vacancy loss, I'm going to spend less on concessions. If I do better on retention, I'm going to spend less on my turns. And frankly, if I'm doing better at all of those things, I could probably spend less on my marketing because I'll have less vacancy to fill. And so if you look at marketing, we have all these different activities, but it's, we were just at NAA, and you have all these vendors that come up to you and, a new ILS or a new this. And it's like, it's really hard to consider trying to spend more money right now when we're actually doing really well. Our occupancy is solid. That's not a big issue. Like, I would be interested in exploring things if I can, there's an arbitrage where, if we're spending more for a certain thing and I could spend less on it, but I'm not looking to add anything. So there's a lot of different categories in marketing. And I think a huge problem, or not a problem, but a challenge, is a lot of folks in marketing don't necessarily have a holistic approach to the whole business. So, these self-guided tours or video touring, or even something like that, is how beneficial is that? Or let me put the question to you guys, like, in the realm of marketing, where do you see the value, or what do you think is a waste of money?
Mo Reed, you're not wearing your Moneyball T-shirt, which is a shame for this conversation, but I'll let you take first crack.
The question is, where do I see the value of marketing in multifamily?
Where are opportunities, or like, where is underrated value, or where's something that's a waste of money?
Well, waste of money, I mean, there's such little amount spent, and I don't want to say that's unfortunate because I don't know that that's wrong. So I'm just giving you a little quick context or background on this point before I answer the question. But I've wondered for a long time now, since we've entered this industry, why people don't spend more money, because I do think there's a lot of missed opportunity. And it relates to this equation you just talked us through, and David's certainly hit that as well with clients. In fact, he spent a lot of time on concessions versus marketing, like during the pandemic, when we saw a lot of people like scrambling and offering concessions. It's like, why not just spend a little bit more money on marketing? It's actually more favorable when you look at the math. But backing up, you know, would a property benefit from tripling their marketing budget? I mean, not many people have like taken big swings or tested those types of theories, and that would, to me, on some level, flesh out like where the excess is, where the waste is, versus where the value is. But generally speaking, we see these really lean, slim budgets that are backed into based on either an operator saying this is what you have to work with on a per door basis, or this is what we did last year. Seems like we're kind of swimming upstream this in 24, and so you can add another 20%. There's not a whole lot of thought or effort put to it, and that's gotten better. So I don't want to make too big sweeping, like, I guess, generalizations here. But that's something I is still unsettled from Moshe, like, on what is an appropriate budget. I've told David many times, and I'll use this, I guess, as an example of where there's an opportunity versus waste. But why do we pace marketing campaigns evenly throughout the month? So I don't know how much you're familiar
I
with,
mean, throughout the year.
the year and the month. What I
Okay.
mean by that is somebody might have $3,500, and I don't mind saying they'll give it to Digital. It's like, hey, we need help marketing. Can you guys run our Google and our Meta, campaigns? And just I feel like because the industry's been so set in its ways, and even a lot of the agencies, and we fall victim to this sometimes ourselves, but we will just pace that evenly over the course, that $3,500 over the course of the month. And so when you think in Moneyball terms, it's like, well, how could we be more efficient, like within the month and even within the day? With our spend, I don't understand why you don't capitalize when you see these kind of ebbs and flows and leads and leasing opportunities, that you wouldn't spend more money in certain days or certain weeks within a 30-day, like a calendar month. But most of the time we hear, well, we want predictability. We don't want to overwhelm the leasing agents and stuff. It's like, so even when there's not as much opportunity, we're going to still spend the same amount, which thereby lowers your ROI for those days or those weeks, just because it's convenient or it's what you expect, versus capitalizing and really pushing when we see demand increase. So there's just so much that's calendar based in the way that we apply budgets in this industry. And that's where I would tell you there's a ton of waste. You could take that, I don't know if it's a step further, but we've said, and we built a tech platform early on that accounted for your actual occupancy. So that's still a problem in the industry, meaning I'm at 98%, but I'm still spending, $5,000 on a diamond sponsorship, on apartments.com. It's like, well, that makes no sense. So more and more of the digital agencies that are running AdWords, or I guess that's not the term anymore, but anyways, search campaigns are flexing more based on what your inventory looks like. But I still think if you keep going underneath that, you'll see the opportunities I'm referring to, which is like, even in a given week or a given month, there's a lot more that you could do to be smarter about how you're capitalizing on the ebbs and flows of renter demand. Were you with me on all that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
that was I think that a lot of people do that where they set it, they have a budget and it could just be flat and they don't make any adjustments. And I'm not involved in on-site marketing anymore, but in the last 6 months or so that I was, we started making adjustments based on uh, season, based on our leasing expiration curve, right? So we're starting to, as you get into the summer, there's not just more demand, but usually you have more expirations. So we might make adjustments ahead of that. So we did start ebbing and flowing with, instead of just having it set flat always. I think that, and I don't know the numbers and I'm not involved in this. Let's just say 80% of apartments are using a property website from their property management software, right? So if you're on Yardi, you're using a Rent Cafe site, you're on Trada, you're using an Entrada site. If you're on RealPage or a Lease Labs or something like that, and they're typically templates. And I think that there's a lot of it's like a mine, to search for gold there. Where, and I think there's some growing companies, and I just disclaimer, I don't know everything that you guys do. I know that you're a marketing agency, and I think you do have a product, but I don't even know if you guys do this. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like trying to sell. over here. But I think that there's a huge opportunity for management companies to stop using these templated websites and actually get a lot more data and intel into how people are using their site and to improve your conversion ratio. And then in even just whether it's retargeting. I mean, you have an ad, you drive someone to your website, you capture that lead, and then you can nurture it with email or something like that. I mean, think of just so much of our marketing is so transactional. You're looking for an apartment, we have it. Do you want to buy it or you want to rent it? And I think that there's so much that could be done in terms of, and especially now with AI and creating content, if you can get a lead to your website and you capture it, this is a potential renter. Wherever they are, they have an expiring lease. When I leased office space and warehouse space, it was really frustrating. There's a lot of cold calling and you get a hold of the CEO and it's like, yeah, our lease ends in 5 years. Okay, can I call you back in 4? But everybody in apartments has an expiring lease. It's 12 months, maybe 16 or 18, but everybody has an expiring lease. So everybody is a prospect. And it could be that you have this email system, nurturing, whether it's about, things in the neighborhood, events, whatever it is. I think that there's a lot, uh, the last time I looked at it, our analytics, almost all of our websites, 80%, I don't remember how much was mobile and how much was desktop, but 80% of the mobile was iPhone, right? So what does that tell me in terms of a user? I don't know, but maybe there's something that I could be using that intel to market better, right? Maybe instead of a concession, maybe we're giving away an iPhone. I don't know. But I think that there's a lot of nuances that are kind of just not looked at because either one, if you're using a template site, you just don't have access to the stuff or you're not even looking at it. Or conversion ratio, like, so I think of like, how do we get more of what we're already spending versus spending more?
So I totally agree with you. Meaning, it seems like we philosophically line up on a few things. So first off, is website as far as like undervalued, would to me back to your Moneyball thing would be website. So in this industry, the last time we did research, it was around 2% was the average conversion rate for a website. Meaning, like if you have a visitor come in, are they going to fill out a lead form, apply now, place a phone call, and that's very low. If you look at other industries like the one I always use, and then that's not that Reed sometimes pushes me on saying that's not exactly the same, but I just love to make the point. But a plumbing website, they usually aim for 20 to 30% conversion rate. And to me, it's strange that a plumber would be that much better at building a website, for example, than an apartment building, right? Because most plumbers are like some mom and pop or, just 1099 sort of individual. Now, as Reed has pointed out to me in the past, it's not exactly a fair comparison. So let me, because of the emergency nature often of plumbing. So let me give
and the significance of the decision.
sure.
Yeah.
So let me give a
But
different one.
I don't mind it. I just like to qualify
I
it.
think it's fair. So then to give a closer one, automotive. I think automotive is similar as far as like in fact, in some ways you may say it's a bigger decision than an apartment because you're making, most people replace
Similar
their cars every
investment.
7 years or something.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at automotive, the high performing automotive dealers, their websites convert at 16%. That is a far cry from the 2% that we're seeing in property management. So to your point, Moshe, what we could, how easy would it be? So what if I look at your thing about like, shoot, what was the stat you gave where like, um, like there's nobody renting the unit. What was that thing that you're talking about?
Vacancy loss.
Thank you. Vacancy loss. Vacancy loss. How easy would it be to reduce vacancy loss by half? Well, I do think we should probably try, but also how simple do I think it might be, the effort to reward of doubling my lead volume? To your point, like I think going from 2% to 4% is not hard. That seems like it should be a layup. Just take some of these best practices from automotive and you could go. So that's a very easy lever. So I think that's an easy lever to pull. And then you could go to other things like how do we reduce vacancy loss? So let me take another tact here and also agree with you. The churn rate in this industry on average is somewhere around 50%, 50 to 56%. Sometimes it's 60% depending on the market, but let's just make it easy and say 50%. If when you look at SaaS software, 50 as far as like when you're buying something, on an annual basis or monthly basis, a 50% churn rate is abysmal. VCs will steer far away from you if you have a 50% churn on your customer base every year, because they're like, man, how are we ever going to fill the funnel on this thing? The marketing expense is going to be insane. So they want to see you somewhere around like less than double digits. They want to see you like under 10%. Now that might change if you're selling like an SMB software, like a MailChimp, but a MailChimp, they still they don't want you to be higher, but they will eventually accept up to 50%, but it has to be a super naturally viral product. It doesn't have a high customer acquisition cost and does have a long lifetime value. Um, Again, for apartments, so 50% is a lot. Now let me try to again make this analogous. Instead of saying SaaS B2B, let me say, what about SaaS consumer? And I pulled up the stat just to be sure. But Netflix, you just read the No Rules Netflix book. Netflix's annual churn, so this is consumer based software, is 2.4%. So well underneath 10%, well underneath the 50% churn that we're seeing with apartments. So do I think we should be seeing a 50% churn in apartments? No. I think that is probably because there's something misaligned as far as from how we run properties, how they are run. And I've got some ideas there, Moshe, but I don't want to I think you're probably closer to it than I am. So if we could reduce churn from 50% to 75%, for example, that's great too. But probably going to be harder to do than increase my lead volume from 2% to 4%. So as far as those buckets you were talking about with how much you guys were losing vacancy loss versus concessions versus marketing, it seems very easy to improve the marketing even on the spend you have. But I also agree with you that vacancy loss should be something that is addressed, and concessions, to Reed's point, it also should be addressed.
So the first thing that comes to mind when you say a 2% conversion rate, what makes that number even worse is the number of misleads. So even if you are converting, you're getting a phone call, you get an email, how many of them go unanswered or unresponded to? So in terms of value, I actually think, one of these virtual leasing platforms where where it's an actual person, right? So let's say you have a community of 500 units and you have 3 leasing agents. No matter what, they're going to miss phone calls, and you're always going to have some sort of scheduling thing. Let's say you have a staffing thing. I'm fascinated by remove one of those leasing agents, use one of these remote leasing platforms where it's a real person. They should be fluent in English. It shouldn't be in some foreign country. And for half that price of that one leasing agent, they're going to answer the call. They're going to respond to leads. They're doing everything up into the tour. So your leasing agents that are there, the two, you're getting more from your marketing because you shouldn't miss anything now. And two, they're going to optimize their workload because you just took out 20% of the time they're spending on these first contact leads. So you're going to have more leads because you're not missing anything, and you're optimizing their time in terms of what they are spending their time on. So I actually think that is a category that I'm really fascinated. It's different than these big call centers. Some of these large companies, call centers, and I've called different properties in different states from the same management company, and I had the same person answer the phone. Those experiences have not always been good, but these remote leasing platforms, I'm fascinated by, and I think that there's a lot of value in something like that because you're cutting the expense if you're replacing an agent, you're maximizing what you're spending on the marketing because you shouldn't be missing leads, right? So within that 2%, you're already wasting money because you're missing leads. And if you go from 3 agents to 2 agents, those 2 agents should be making more money, and the property's not spending more money because they're just going to have more commissions because it's now divided between 2 people instead of 3 people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what we've seen is the unanswered call rate is around like 56%. So again, let's round down, and so we'll say 50%. So now instead of 2%, you're really at 1%, right? Because it doesn't get captured. So now that's not counting the emails that aren't responded to and stuff. I'm saying specifically calls. To your point on leasing agents, or maybe this virtual leasing thing, I agree it's worth testing. It's similar to in enterprise sales, they now have an SDR and a BDR, right? So you have someone that qualifies someone that comes in and sets the appointment. So you have an appointment setter basically, and then you have the person that's actually handling the sale. So it's not, I don't believe it's a great customer experience to like switch contacts all the time. However, not answering the phone at all is a much worse experience than switching contacts. Like, oh, I was talking to Josie and now I'm talking to Phil. That is more acceptable to me than just not being able to answer the phone or not replying to an email. So, but I wanted to go real quick, Moshe, back to your original Moneyball and John Doerr. Sorry, John Doerr is the guy that wrote the book Measure What Matters. So what problem would you be trying to solve specifically with your remote leasing agent?
So what problem am I trying to solve? Well, I guess the results that I would get would be I should have more leads because I'm not missing any phone calls now and email things. I'm reducing expenses because I'm paying a fraction for this remote versus a full-time person. And I should be improving or optimizing the workload for the two agents that are on site, and they should be making more money. So the people that I do have should be making more money, should have a better workload balance, and we should be leasing better, a higher, more efficient, and saving costs. I don't know if that answers your questions, but those, to me, the results that you would be getting.
Yeah, those are great benefits, and I agree those are probably true. But I don't want to push you too hard going John Doerr on this, where it's like choose one thing, right? But he
Okay.
often advocates for choosing one thing to say I'm solving this. Now these other ancillary things are nice benefits, but my understanding of his writing is that he often wants you to say this is clearly what I'm trying to solve. These other things might be beneficial outcomes, but it stops you from sort of getting like what if I get half the original outcome, like half the phones get answered versus all the phones get answered, right? And then I also get these other things. It just makes you really hone in on like this is the one thing I want to make sure we solve and don't come back to.
So
But
if I had to have one objective, it would be I don't have the right word, but it's optimizing the workload for the leasing team,
okay,
right? Because, let's say you have three agents and then one quits on you without any notice and the other one's on vacation. That's going to be a ton for that last agent. But if you have a solution like this, like you don't have a situation like that. And then even when you're running smoothly and you don't have any fires, their workload should be balanced because you just took off a lot of busy work that's not actually I mean, it is somewhat selling, but you're optimizing the workload balance for your leasing team.
cool. Well, Reed, where do you want to go next?
Well, two questions I wanted to ask you, and first let me validate what I meant to ask right when we started. You are self-professed the most curious person in real estate, or is it multifamily?
Multifamily.
Okay, all right. Because you're
In
talking to a pretty curious person here
the
too. And I
Northeast
was like,
region,
I'm kind of ready to put my horse up against Moshe. But I love that you put your yeah, self-proclaimed, I guess. But unless somebody gave you that title,
No, but nobody's challenged it. Like, I don't want to be, I can't come out and say, I don't want to be pretentious. I'm not the best looking. I'm not the this or that. I thought it was a safe place to go.
it's probably safer than most. I'd agree with that. But yeah, very curious guy sitting across from me.
it's kind of
But
like a
maybe it doesn't
boxer.
stop short for you with
Like a
multifamily.
boxer can't give himself his own nickname. You can't
Right.
be like, yeah, Hands of Steel or whatever. It's like, no, no, no.
That
Someone else has to give you Hands of Steel. You can't do Hands of
totally.
Steel.
That's also from Bull Durham. Like he's like, I
Oh,
need a nickname, and but he's outsourcing it.
yeah.
Definitely understands he can't give it to
I
himself.
told you, I told that story before, right? At the nickname I tried to give myself.
I think so, but I couldn't call it up right now.
Yeah. So when I was in, I think it was like sixth grade,
Does that have
Moshe.
something to do with speed?
No, but I
Okay.
I will take a speed nickname for sure. Hot Shot. That's my new nickname. Hot Shot. Anyways, I was gonna call myself Fruit Punch because I wanted a good nickname. I was like, oh, I drink fruit punch every day. And my mom was like, this might be the best thing she ever did for me. She's like, maybe not. Maybe let's keep
Yeah,
looking. I was
yeah.
like,
Why don't
okay.
you?
Thanks, Mom. I didn't understand. I was like, what's the problem?
There's a lot of things, especially in
Yeah.
Dallas, that could have
Yeah.
gone wrong for you.
Yeah.
But the questions, and that's why I had to call out the most curious. But I know you consume a lot of content and ask a lot of great questions, and so I'm curious to know how you would answer this. What should we be talking more about right now within the industry, and what should we be talking less about right now within the industry? So you're as somebody that, again, is constantly consuming and learning about the industry, what do you feel we probably should be moving on from or not spending as much time on versus where we should be leaning in more than we are?
There's a book, and I think it's called "To Be a Market Leader," something along those lines. I don't even know who wrote it, but the premise of the book is to be a market leader, you have to be the best at one of three things, and you can't stink at the other two. And that's best product, customer intimacy, and operational efficiency. So when I heard this concept, I started going through this process, and I said to myself, okay, we're buying properties, so best product can't be our North Star. And even if you are building your property, you're probably going to be pretty similar to your direct comps. So I don't think that that should be somebody's North Star, but your product can't stink. Customer intimacy, and we're going to go to what David was talking about in terms of turnover and retention. Like, there are going to be people who move out that's beyond your control. Renting an apartment is not necessarily a permanent solution for a lot of people. So you can't stink at your customer service and that experience, but I don't think that should be a North Star because there's always going to be people who you can't control. And so you're trying to reduce the controllable outcomes, right? So you can't control if somebody, some life situation, or if they buy a house, but you can control the experience. You can control how you process your renewals, how you deal with that, your maintenance, all those kinds of things. So there are definitely controllable things. So you should be measuring what your turnover is, and you're trying to eliminate the preventable ones. And then the third is operational efficiency. So I kind of became obsessed with this, I think, in 2021, that's what we can control. And so we've been very hyper focused on operational efficiency. I think a lot of the noise and the attention is dominated by centralization, or that term. And I think that it's not fair, one, because most of the things that are talked about really only are practical for the top 50 or for such large management companies, because they have the budgets and the resources to do things that the average size company can't. If you look at the total number of units, I think in the top 50, it's less than 20% of the whole market. So if a lot of the noise and the conversations around things that doesn't even apply to more than 50% of the market, I think we're missing on something. So I think in a general sense, we should be talking about operational efficiency. And a more specific thing is, I think actually outsourcing for things is a I'm not necessarily hearing conversation about it. Maybe I'm creating the conversation about it, but I'm seeing more companies, like, all of a sudden at NAA, I met like 4 or 5 companies that are doing turns for you, right? So you could outsource it to them. They're going to do the full turn for you, turning the unit. Um, and I think, and I met a company that, I mean, I know these things exist, outsourcing your accounting. But like, I didn't realize how big some of these companies are. Companies, mid-sized companies, actually, instead of having an accounting department, maybe they'll have one person, and then they're outsourcing it and having somebody else take care of it. You have less risk, you have less overhead, and the cost for doing that part of your business is lower because they can be more efficient at it than if you're doing it in-house. So, and when I think of like a remote leasing agent, I think that's outsourcing a part of your on-site operation, not to tech, but actually outsourcing it to a company that can provide, possibly in that special area, a better service at a lower cost. So I think outsourcing, and under the umbrella of operational efficiency.
Cool. Well, I dig it. I'm curious how, when you say not stink at the other two, I'm going to call out the customer intimacy, but that's something that we may have overlooked a little bit. I'm not saying by a lot, but as we tried to increase our operational efficiency at Digital, and it's been an ongoing battle for the last few years, but I think we really tried to step into it in 22. There were some areas that maybe we underestimated could get compromised as a result of spotlighting, efficiency and operational efficiency related to customer intimacy and related to, sometimes even the performance of, the work that we were doing. But I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or concerns or qualifiers as you say this is what we should be spending more time and effort on, that you've already experienced where there is some sort of concession, using that word somewhat, uh,
I
whatever,
get it.
um, or compromises that you may need to be prepared for if you're going to really put your focus forward towards operational efficiency. So just
Well,
think, like, if it's all about efficiency, are there certain sacrifices, compromises that you may need to make or be prepared to make related to your customer or renter's experience?
So efficiency, yes, there has to be a balance, and it's not just making it faster and more efficient by sacrificing the experience. When you buy a deal, you underwrite it. I did a post about this, that everybody should be underwriting the renewals. You're talking about such high turnover, but a lot of owners will get sidetracked or delusional because I'm fine with that person leaving because I'm replacing it with somebody who's paying $250 more or $200 more. But you should be underwriting your renewals, right? In that equation, it's not $200 more. What's the vacancy loss? What's the turn cost? What's the marketing and leasing expenses in order to fill it? I don't know how many companies, I think people are starting to do measure this, but the number of days vacant, right? We were talking about at the beginning, like, how do you get more bang for your buck? If you renew somebody and it's a modest increase, it costs you nothing. And the return on $0, like what you're getting, is huge. There's no vacancy loss, there's no marketing expense, there's no turn cost, and there's no downtime, and you just bump the rent $50. Versus how much is it going to cost for me to have that person vacate, turn the unit, spend the money on marketing and leasing in order to replace it, and now I'm getting $150, but it was vacant for 30 days. And sometimes, like, if you would actually underwrite it, like, you'll be doing so much better at that modest $50 increase versus the 150. So in efficiency, that's like, and your property is going to be so much more efficiency. Like, if you reduce your number of move outs by 10%, like, if you're doing especially if you're doing these turns in-house, like, how much more time your maintenance is going to be to work on other things. So that is a lot more efficient to improve your renewals. And we became very hyper focused on our renewals in, I would say, 2022, because it was like, whatever was happening in the market, like, this is not sustainable, this crazy rent growth, and it's going to pop, and we don't want to be greedy. We have a saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
Yeah, I heard of that one. I say it too much. That's why we're laughing.
I thought you always attributed your dad.
Yeah. My dad's the person that invented that.
Yeah.
So efficiency is not like, you could have a machine that answers your phone and takes care of that whole thing, and that could be a bad experience, and you can say that's more efficient. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, we're starting, and part of my role is to figure out, like, how can we be more efficient when it comes to expenses. So when it comes to purchasing, a lot of our properties were just operating in silos. Each one has their own vendor for something. Like, hey, everything is within, an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. It's within arm's reach. So how can we become more strategic on our purchasing? Like, if we start to consolidate some of the vendors that we're using, we can be more efficient with our pricing, with our service, whatever. We entertained even starting our own painting company just so we could be more efficient with that. We decided not to do that. But I think there's a lot of areas, and that's why I think outsourcing is a huge thing, because when you outsource certain things, you can actually become so much more efficient. And again, you're right. You don't want to be sacrificing your experience, right? If you're outsourcing your accounting, that shouldn't be sacrificing any experience for anybody.
Moshe, what do you think is so? Let me back you guys up on this. I love the Jeff Bezos quote: "Do what makes your beer taste better, but don't focus on anything else." And let me also add, it's my understanding that the only thing that Red Bull now does that they don't outsource is the content. So they outsource the production, the logistics, the deliver everything except for the custom content that they make. That to me is really interesting. So that means Red Bull has decided the only thing that they can do that so it is a little bit contrary to like what makes your beer taste better, I mean the Jeff Bezos thing, but I think it's more about like what is your unique value prop that no one else can do, and then everything else you should outsource. Seems to me that Red Bull's doing pretty good. So I like that they've decided like, okay, they do content better than anything else. They just happen to monetize it via their energy drink, right? But they don't need to change the formula at this point. They don't need to handle the bottling or the logistics, blah, blah, blah. So what is it for property management? Like what would be the beer taste better or the Red Bull of property management that you couldn't outsource?
Interesting. Good question. Something that we've leaned into is self-management. So we manage ourselves, and I think that that's something we wouldn't relinquish. So that's like the umbrella of our whole operations. But I think that you could, outsource certain parts of that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think like for us, we wouldn't consider outsourcing our management part, because that has become like our backbone and our competitive advantage. I think we've seen others that are, if you're not good at something, then outsourcing is a solution for you. So I think that has become our strong point, that we're very good with the operational part, that the management part, we could outsource other individual parts that we do, whether it's accounting, whether it's remote leasing, whether it's outsourcing the I mean, we looked at outsourcing for purchasing, having a third party come in and do all the bidding for our contracts. That's like a tool, that's a task, or a commodity versus the core of in-house management.
Where
But I
where
can't
does
speak for like the whole industry, because I think it's a totally different world when you talk about third party management and self management. And I think there's it I don't even know the difference. Like it can get really messy, because third party management is just, it's not a knock on them. There's a need for them, and there's some that are really good, but it's just a race to bring on more business. And I would be curious what their their churn numbers are. How
yeah.
many,
Well,
I mean, we had a competitor, a property across the street, that went through every year and a half, they changed management companies.
Reed and I have seen quite a bit of that turnover too. I don't have a good number though to share as far as what the average third party management churn is, but I do agree with you that meaning I don't think every management company should pick the same thing, the same strategy. It's like Monster has a different strategy than Red Bull, right? As far as like what their competitive advantages. It's similar to like when we read Seven Powers. Seven Powers is like you could have someone that has process power and you could have someone else that has like brand power. So I think it's okay that like different folks in property management have different things. But let me ask you this: when you say management, where does then management for you begin and end?
What do you mean?
Meaning, like you said, you wouldn't ever outsource management, but then you said other components. So where does management begin versus end there in your statement of like you wouldn't outsource management?
Okay, so for us, I mean, they're W-2 employees. They work for Sage, operationally. So that's all of us. That I would include asset management. So we're doing the pricing, and we control. I mean, so they control, but we're calling the shots for that. But we do like we do have a consultant that we work with for various elements. We do have a consultant that we work with for pricing. So like we're calling the shots, but they have a system and they're making suggestions, and we have a weekly call with them. Um, you know, I'm not involved in the day to day, but I think we can outsource, something like a remote leasing agent. We could outsource our turns. We can outsource, like, so there's a lot of syndicators on LinkedIn that are buying deals, and they talk about how great they're doing. They don't tell you how many deals they're not distributing on right now. They have a lot of floating debt, and they have some challenges, but almost all of them have their own construction company. So I'm not saying anything, but it seems that that would be a conflict of interest, because you're buying a property and now you're spending $10,000 to $15,000 to turn each unit, and from the investors, whether that's good for the investment or not, that happens. But the owner, who has his own construction company, is making money off of that. We don't do that. We have an in-house project manager, but we're outsourcing the different components for the renovations. So we have someone who spearheads it, but we're not making money off the construction.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we run into that with different management companies that also do marketing, like have a subsidiary or, child company that does the marketing, and maybe the all the owners don't necessarily know that that third party management's also gonna take fees in the marketing. So, I hear you on the, I guess like the conflict of interest. Well, where do you want to go now?
No,
Well,
I'm good.
can I bring up something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I get pitched all the time for, this credit reporting. All of a sudden that's like the biggest thing. And but when you talk about like value, so how valuable is that? I don't know. it's hard to gauge like what the return is going to be on. Some people have issues with the companies that just do positive reporting, right? It could be artificially boosting people's credit scores because, they could be missing payments, but that's not being reported on. It's only being reported on if they make a good payment. So they only get the upside and there's no downside. And then again, from an owner's perspective, how beneficial is that? So I have people who reach out to me. It's like, it could be good, could be not good, but like in terms of value, like I'm having a hard time seeing the value. And it's not like I'm not trying to help somebody who needs to be helped. I'm not going there. I'm just saying from our operational focus, priority, not priority, like it's hard for me to see how that could be a priority when like I don't even see where's the value. I do see companies that are doing positive and negative, and they could say that the value is on collections because if it's reporting negative, then it's an incentive for residents to pay the rent on time. If you're talking about value, like the AI stuff that's happening in terms of collections, very valuable, right? We're in the business. We're a for-profit business, and you only make money if you're collecting it all or as much as you can collect, right? So you talk about value add. If your collections is at 95% and you can, without changing anything, go from 95 to 98, like that's a huge boost versus how do I move my occupancy from 94 to 95?
Can you maybe just, I don't know this metric, but is that real? The 95 to 98 as far
You
as
mean the
collection?
dollar amount?
Yeah. Like, well, how often do folks actually default? Or like, you can
I
give me
feel like we
directionally.
got that from guarantors, but I can't remember what it was. If it was as high
Well,
as
it doesn't even have to be that they default, but it could just be that there's a lag. And it's all going to depend on the jurisdiction that you're in and if it's how tenant friendly it is and it's not in evictions. But, we became hyper focused on this right before COVID on our collections and measuring it and having all this metrics that we look at. But during COVID, like we were very adventurous that we couldn't do any evictions because everything was closed. We were doing these cash for key program because worse than a vacant unit is an occupied unit that's not paying rent.
Interesting. So, again, directionally, but is it or slow pay? Maybe how often? Do you have anything directional for me?
I don't have a report, but I could tell you that a year ago we had two properties that would not they were collecting around 90%, so they had about 10% vacancy, and I think as of last month every property is under 5%.
Okay, that's
So
super
like
interesting.
in
I
terms
just
of
was
a
curious
dollar
because in
amount,
our,
that's
yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. I just because I know our business and our average day for paid invoice is 26 days. It used to be like, I think it's like 48 or 50 days, but then we got it down to 26. And since then, I've been pretty comfortable with that. So we haven't tried to push it faster. But we have very low no pays. So we feel very fortunate there because most management companies like pay us, they pay what's due. So I just feel super fortunate. Um, Sorry though, I got you a little bit off track there. You were asking, what were you asking before?
no. I was just throwing out other things when you talk about value. So like the
Oh,
rent reporting, credit
invoice.
reporting, I'm having a trouble seeing the value. Any tool that's helping you improve your collections to me seems very valuable.
I agree with you there. I think I mean, you would know better than I, but my assumption on why they cared about credit reporting is it's just a revenue grab, because don't the management companies get pretty good revenue share from whoever signs up for it?
But I'm saying, I mean, you're talking about like I mean, I don't know. I I don't
It's
know the
minor
numbers.
dollars compared to other things that they could put. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because you like even if you were charging someone $10 a month and let's say the management company got $5 for that on 200 units, that's not considerable compared to if they put the same effort into something else. I mean, Reed and I sometimes bring up, I forget who told us, Reed, but that most management companies might only take on 3 rollouts a year. Do
hmm
you remember who told us?
I don't, and I don't know that that would be fair to say is a typical.
Okay.
It was obviously whoever we were talking to, but
Yeah.
feel like that's all over the board.
Yeah. But anyways, if it was true or something in that vein is true, then why would you pick something that's going to give you like 10
Right,
grand a month,
right,
maybe?
right.
So I think you're right,
Got to be
Moshe.
more selective than that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting about the credit thing, just for a quick aside, and then we can go back, have another question. But it's almost like to your point about like if you don't report on people that are doing bad and you only report on the good, there was this interesting NPR story that just came out about like, do high polluters actually pay the real cost? And it was just saying like, um, well, yeah, it was just saying like generally speaking, we all like China pollutes more than the US. The US gets the benefit of them polluting versus us, right? Like a lot of stuff gets manufactured in China because there's looser regulations there than
Mhm.
there are here, and yet we get the benefit of the low cost of goods, but the pollution it's everywhere. It causes global pollution, not so it was just an interesting NPR story saying that like the
Mm.
real polluters don't actually pay the real cost typically, and so on and so forth. So that's how I kind of feel about the credit reporting. It's like if you're not reporting on the bads, you're not really helping yourself. You're going after the money grab of the $5, but
Totally.
not
It's a
after.
great comparison.
Yeah. Well, Moshe, I wanted to ask you specifically about well, two things actually. I'll go to the thing that I think is more engaging first. What then back to your Moneyball interest, what it would be the metric for Moneyball? So similar that what's the Moneyball for apartments? So you said for the A's it was getting on base, right? How could we pay the least amount of dollars to get on base? What is that metric, do you think, for maybe I should say property management?
I think it's the I don't know what you would call it, but like how do you get more for spending less? So if you put in recess lighting, the return is higher than by putting like you spent less and your return is higher. If you're focused on something on collections, like your return is higher than if you're bringing in potentially more leads or something like that. Like that's money that's already owed to you. The value there of collecting all that, right? If you boost your occupancy, but then they don't pay rent, that doesn't help anybody. There's a lot of folks that like they'll say their occupancy is 95, but you have X amount of residents who are not paying rent. That there's no value in that. They'll call that economic, occupancy, like how many are actually paying. Um, I'm blanking on what I was going to say else, but yes, it's how do I if you have a renewal, right? So if I don't spend any money and I'm renewing, like the return on that is huge. So I don't have a name or like an exact metrics, but how do you spend less and get a higher return?
Well, yeah,
Optimizing it.
it's like net income return or something, right? Like spend $1, get $1.50 back or something. Well, Reed, this is probably near and dear to you. You've been really pressing the team this past year, or I guess this year, this last 6 months, on what's the outcome or whatever. So does that track with you? Like, would Digital end up picking a similar metric here
For our clients or for ourselves?
for ourselves?
Yeah, I don't think we know that yet. I wish we did. And I believe that was in one of the Jim Collins books. Are you familiar with those, Moshe? The Jim Collins?
Good to great.
Yeah, yeah. He did a whole series of those, and one of the things he highlighted, and I don't know if it was in the Good to Great or if it was Built to Last, but I feel like it may have been Built to Last. But he talks about how many companies don't really know, I guess, the Moneyball example of like on base percentage getting the first. And in order to do that, you have to go through a pretty thorough discovery with your data. Doesn't mean you have to outsource that necessarily, but the example of Walgreens, I think, was what he used and said, that at the C-suite level, they kind of had it wrong, as far as what they were paying attention to. Come to find out after they, went through very rigorous kind of discovery and experimentation with all of their data, was that it was the amount of share of wallet within like a tenth of a mile of their stores. Something to that effect was the metric that really was most important for their business. And so I'm still waiting on that, not meaning that we haven't, made some efforts here, but I think I don't know how much it would vary from one asset to the next, within all the subsets of real estate and property management, or if there's going to be some, you know, metric like on base percentage that surfaces, um, that a lot of people can rally, I guess, or point towards. But I
Well,
just
I
think
would
it's very
say
individualized, I guess.
I think like in your space, so I'm talking about outsourcing. Like I think there's gonna be more outsourcing of marketing, right? People are gonna there are people who are unfortunately losing jobs in marketing, and it just becomes a lot easier to outsource those things versus do that in house. You're gonna do it. You're gonna be better at it. Like you have a whole team of experts versus one or two people doing it in house, or three people, whatever that team size is. Like you guys are the specialists. That's all you do. Number two, it's going to be more cost effective to outsource it to you versus doing that kind of thing in house. Now, if I think for all prop tech companies, and specifically a company like yours, like your North Star, like customer intimacy, because let's say you have 10 management companies or whatever number of customers that you have, and you have 2 or 3 different points of contact at that company, like they're looking to you as the expert and the resource for all things marketing. And if we're being honest, the conferences are not doing it for people in terms of education, right? So and wherever, if you have a VP of marketing or whatever that title of your point of contact at, like wherever they're going to go, like the closer they are to your brand and their belief in you as the resource, the likelihood of them leaving is never gonna, it like goes down. So if you were like, you're creating content here to really help educate your and stay in touch with not just your customers, but it's a marketing play. But like if you would put on these, I don't know, webinars or whatever it might be, where you're bringing people together, like you could do, instead of a recording, you do like a once a month, question and answers with David and Reed, or maybe you bring in somebody else and like everybody could ask their questions about SEO, or they could ask their questions about AdWords, or they could ask their questions about who knows what. Like all of a sudden you are part of their routine and you're that like you're their secret weapon.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a typical, though, if we're going to stay with the 3 categories of customer intimacy, best product, and operational efficiency that most companies go through, especially if we can narrow in on startups. So, wouldn't it typically start with best product, then move to customer intimacy? And again, this is acknowledging like you can't stink at the others, but you better have a good product if you're breaking into an industry. You don't have time to rely on customer intimacy, to really gain traction, right? And then once you've gained some traction, you can really hopefully start to form and build those relationships and augment your customer intimacy. And then once you hit scale, doesn't it naturally shift then towards operational efficiency? And I feel in many ways that's what our journey has been, is we needed to make sure that anybody that, and I'm gonna say our product is a little different because it is the experience itself in many ways, but
Mhm.
I could just stop there. Do you follow me though on that, Moshe, as far as like what might
Yeah,
be typical?
I don't, obviously you can't stink, like you can't come out and have a bad product, but I don't know that you have to come out in your like, I don't remember what it was like in the early days, but Zappos, let's say they're not the best product for buying shoes online, but they had the best customer service, and that became what they were so well known for. I think you could become a market leader in prop tech just by fantastic marketing, because so many are not even good at that. But I don't know that you, yes, your product can't stink, but I think that
The
um,
the blurred lines here though is when you use Zappos, because we both read that one too. What, something happiness?
That's exactly what I was like. It's not the pursuit of happiness, but
It's not. That's the Will
I
Smith.
think it's delivering happiness.
thank
There
you.
you go. Thank you. Delivering happiness. But the customer service or support is the product in many ways, not just like
Okay.
how easy it is to transact or buy a pair of shoes. And I feel like there's that holds true to a lot of, I guess, the way we see or think about product here is it's not just our ability to execute campaigns or some of the new technical solves that we have for different aspects of marketing. It's the experience itself. So, and I'm not saying you have to choose. I'm just commenting since you use Zappos as an example. In many ways, I feel like their customer service is the product.
Well, it could be that you like, and I'm not telling you what to do in your company, but like your resources and your customer intimacy could become your product versus just 2 handsome guys selling a product.
Hey, look, we're not the
Is
most
there 3 of
curious,
us
but
in
we're the
here?
most handsome. Well, this has been really fun. I have one last tact, and then we'll let you get out of here. I know we're close to time. But what other do you have any? You mentioned obviously, since you are so curious, do you have any burning questions that you want to ask us? Nothing's off the table, or gripes that you'd like us to comment on. So something with marketing or whatever. I don't know, just us personally that you that you don't like or you want us to comment on.
Personal question, like how do you guys use some sort of system like EOS or OKRs or something for creating company goals or what you're going after?
Yeah, we're on EOS. We
Okay.
started that in 2020, I think, right?
19.
Oh, 19?
Yep.
Yeah. So EOS has been great. I like the concept of OKRs quite a bit, and we've had some folks on the tech team that really like OKRs as well. It doesn't quite line up with how EOS does its goaling and such. But I also like Marty Kagan's stuff for who's a
Yeah,
product guy.
100%. I figured we might get there, but we don't have time for that. But
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. It should be. There's a lot of lessons value in the operating model that Marty Kagan evangelizes, and I guess kind of developed that multifamily would benefit a ton from, as far as how to solve problems, which problems to solve, and then really knowing, how to measure, as you talk, measuring what matters, but the business outcomes and the time to money is the phrase that David knows I'm latched onto right now from that book. Because there's a lot of times that, we get excited or talk about outcomes or OKRs, but what's missed is really like the time to get there, and, um, what's acceptable and what's not. Um,
Time to money though would be good for Moshe. Like the way that he's talking about like what's the best return on that income, if you will. It's like I like Marty's thing about like, okay, but in what time period? So
yeah,
it'd be like within
exactly.
6 months or within 12 months or something.
Big difference of like if it takes you 18 months to have time to outcome or time to money
Yeah.
versus 6 months. And then those trade-offs, if you actually know them, make it much easier to make a good informed decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the other, I don't know if it's a gripe or not a gripe, what do you call it? But I think that the education part of our conferences is not really serving anybody except for those that want to promote themselves. And that's not a knock on them. There's nothing wrong with that. But what was interesting about RecCon is they actually had really short sessions. So like you could get a lot in and keep things moving. But I think that, so something that we started doing is quarterly, we would reach out to, and we're starting to build a group, but other executives at management companies and bring them together for lunch, and we'll bring in a sponsor and we'll have a topic. So we've done in the past, we did purchasing, or we did budgets, we've done tech. So we have like different topics and everybody kind of shares their things freely, and it's collaborative and helpful. And I think that there's a big wide open space for doing things like that versus everybody going to NAA, which, and again, it's not everybody. Like people call it the Super Bowl. It's, how many management companies are actually represented there. I think it's a small percentage of the industry. And so I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts? We'll keep it to marketing, because like the specialized marketing conferences are the same place, same schedule, same speakers every year.
Well, I know this isn't Moneyball, Reed, but I feel like this is T-ball for you. Like he just really said it.
Yeah, he's just saying that because I've been complaining about this for years. And I do think mostly self-serving, but I just think there's huge opportunities here to shift or shake up the way that content's brought to the industry. So completely aligned there, Moshe, and I love kind of the TED Talk concept. It sounds like that you guys have already I guess got some traction or arranged. But I think what you'll still see, or there's a need for NAA and some of these other big conferences, is the networking. And so I have to overlook personally, I guess, the gap or disappointment in content, and that it seems so predictable. I don't want to get too cynical here, because there are some examples, and I appreciate the retcon like plug, and how they shook things up a bit, with the shorter sessions and having more of them. Um, it's trade-offs, because when you do that, sometimes you lose the depth. There's not as much interactivity. I like the idea of workshops where you can actually get people involved, but that's harder to scale. So there's not a simple fix. I don't want to pretend like there is, in the way that we produce and ingest content in the industry. But what I do know is it's broken, and so I applaud anybody that's trying to innovate or take some different approaches to help solve the problem.
Yeah, I would say maybe not broken, because that my thing with this is like clearly it hasn't changed, because for those that are putting on the conferences, it works, right? So back to your like, what outcome do they care about? The marketing specific conferences care about that they get their sponsorships filled, care about that they grew revenue or kept revenue the same, and it just from my outside perspective, it seems to be working for them, even though as you're saying,
It's working for them.
yeah, it's working for them. Yeah, yeah. But it's kind of like vote with your dollar, right? Like the more that all of us sponsors show up at those events, the more that all the people come anyways to those events, all the marketers or whatever. Why should it change? So instead, I just view it as ripe. It's kind of like as if we were like McKinsey and we were building like what's that like? Is it Quantex or what's whatever, one of those charts like strike zones. And it's like there's an opportunity, there's a strike zone opportunity where someone could come in with a conference that has, as you're saying, whether it's workshops or but fill this void and provide greater value to the sponsors and greater value to the attendees.
Well, you know what book I'm reading that perfectly captures this or this issue.
Well, I know you're reading Culture Map, but that can't be it, right?
Innovator's Dilemma.
Oh, yeah, I forget. Yeah. I'm so excited.
Isn't that exactly what these conference heads, if you will, or
yeah.
program directors are looking at? Is like, we don't want to cannibalize or risk, the success we've had. And so when will the disrupting kind of, in this case, not technology, but, content producer come along? And will they overshoot the market? I mean, it's just fascinating, like to think about these examples of Innovator's Dilemma. But I think that's definitely the scenario that the conference hosts are dealing with right now.
And who's willing to spend 5 or 7 years to do that?
Right.
Because that's what I've heard. It takes 5 to 7 years to
You
get a
have to have
conference
the
off the ground,
stamina. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, anyways, Moshe, this was super fun. I really appreciated your in-depth questions. So next time we have someone else fall out again for our schedule, we'll just have to give you a break. You'll be like on the bat phone or whatever for us.
You call me Plan B.
Yeah, there you go. We can swap out the curiosity nickname.
Our Plan A, Plan B. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, if people want to hear more from you, you've got a podcast, so maybe give that a plug and whatever else you want them to follow.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty vocal over there and post pretty frequently. And I do have a podcast, The Curious Wire, if you want to check it out, if you are curious. Thanks for having me, guys. I hope it was a home run for you. I had a blast.